Okay, hello, my name's Carolyn. Our interpreter this evening will voice over for hearing people so we can make sure we've got good access for everybody, so deaf and hearing people all have access tonight. Okay, and later on in the question and answer, if people want to ask questions using their voice, that's fine, interpreter will sign. My job, I work for the BDA, the British Deaf Association. I hope people know about the BDA. It's a deaf-led organisation here in the UK, covers the entire UK, and we're just celebrating 125 years of its existence, okay, so as a deaf-led organisation. The BDA has always believed that the deaf person has the right to access to communication through sign language, through their first language. So this is why the British Deaf Association has always campaigned for sign language, for that visual communication for access. Okay, so that's the BDA. Now the film you're here to see, okay, I'll just give you a little bit of background to make sure you've got an idea, okay? It's been a 3-year project. It finishes in December, okay, the 3-year project. So what we've done, well, a lot of people sort of said, you know, look at the old films. You've got all the old film reels. Remember the film reels where you had the long strip of film? Okay. What happened was we got interested in about 2004. Some builders were doing some work on a building in London. And outside there was a big skip. And all the building work was going on. And they found some old reels of film. And there was a big label on there saying BDDA. That was the British Deaf and Dumb Association, the old name. Okay, so they found these big reels of film with BDDA on. And somebody said, oh, I've got a deaf friend, you know, we're asking what this is all about. So this friend said, oh my God, you've got to get these to the BDA. Okay, these are films from the 1930s. All right, amazing, incredibly valuable, an amazing find in a skip outside a building site. So, 2007, everybody knows about See Here TV program. See Here showed a clip of one of the old films on the TV program. The audience for See Here were amazed. And everybody said, we want more of this. Okay, so the BDA applied to the lottery project. And they got some lottery funding for the 3-year project. Because essentially this is a very unusual topic, unusual films. So the idea came from that. Okay, so in the end we collected 500 old films. Okay, the old reels and videos, you know, stuff that just couldn't really be used now. So we've digitized it. We've put it into a digital format, which means everybody's got access to these old films again. Okay, and we'll explain later what we're going to do with those afterwards. Okay, so not only did we have these old films, there's lots of people in these old films. So we wanted to know what it was about. So we did some training in London. Okay, and we went to a project in London. And they said, oh, look, you know, in all the years that we've worked with old film, we've tried to identify the people in these old films. This is hearing people we're talking about. They said they've managed to identify one person in 10 years. Okay, one person in 10 years. So we came along with our BDDA film footage. And we thought, part of this project, okay, we have got to go all around the UK, and what we want to do, we want to go to the northwest, the northeast, the Midlands, okay, the southwest, that's my area, southwest and Wales, and we went all over to the deaf clubs. You might remember me coming to the deaf club in Carolyn. You might remember seeing me there, okay? I remember some faces, okay, and people were saying, oh, I know that person in the film, I know that person, and some people were even saying, that's me in that film, you know, and I remember this happening. So from the films from 1930s to 2000, okay, they said, oh, I reckon we can identify maybe 40 odd people. I reckon we should aim to identify 40 people. So we went all around the UK in 6 months. Okay, how many names do you reckon we got? How many people do you think we identified? 479. 479 people identified. Okay, so we were aiming for 40 and we ended up with 479. Simple. Because, as you know, the deaf community is small. Everybody knows everybody. Yeah, so that's how we managed to do that. And what we did, a lot of people we interviewed, okay, there was 111 people who said they were actually in those films. Now, this is a 70-minute film that you're going to see tonight, so that we've picked selections of pieces to show. And again, thanks to lottery funding, you know, we've created this 70-minute film. And we want to thank Chapter as well for tonight for letting us show this here. Okay, we also showed it Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday. So thank you very much to Chapter. It's really, really important that we were able to show this. Okay, and tonight, I've come tonight, okay, to talk about who's in the film, and when we've finished, hopefully people have some questions and I'll be able to answer your questions after you've seen the film. Okay, I know you're all excited to see the film, okay. So, I'm going to stop. I'm going to let you see this film, this amazing piece of history. You know, it'll be like getting in a time machine for some of you. It really will, okay. Enjoy yourselves, thank you. Okay, I just want to explain something. We'll have a little question and answer session. It might be easier if I sign. We have an interpreter do the voiceover. If anybody wants to ask a question, if they want to speak the question, we have a roving microphone that Claire can bring round. Okay, so just stay where you are, and the interpreter will come up and sign the questions. Okay, so any deaf people can have access to the question. If we have any deaf people who want to ask questions in sign language, it's up to you. You can either come round and stand on the stage, or for those of you who'd rather be shy and stay there, you can sign to me, that's fine, and then I'll relay that back to the audience, okay? Access is really important here. So the film we've just seen, you remember I explained this old film footage. Okay, remember we had nearly 500 pieces of film footage, okay? And it's impossible to show it all to you. So before you start asking questions, I'm going to say, I'm going to give you some information here. Okay, so all of the old film footage, you remember the films we saw, the deaf clubs and things like that? We've got that all now on a history pin sender, okay? So it's sort of deaf history all on the web. So you can access this, okay, from your own home. So you can go home, okay, put in the website address that I'm going to give to you, and you can have a look at this at home on your own computer, okay, all the different films, pieces of film. This is really important because, you know, this is deaf history, and, you know, some of it was the first footage, you know, back then. Remember in deaf clubs, you know, and deaf schools. Now, deaf clubs, deaf schools, they're closing down, you know. So that old footage, it's really at risk of getting lost, you know. And we're desperate that clubs don't throw stuff out. So the idea is that if you've got stuff at home, you know, you can go home and you can actually upload photos, you can upload footage, you can scan things. Okay, so if you know deaf people who've got old photos or old footage of deaf clubs and things, you can actually scan it, you can upload it, okay, and then the whole world can see it. Okay, the idea is, you know, to keep these things alive. If it's old film footage, I know there's probably a cost involved in digitizing that, but if you're keen, if you're interested in doing it, you know, go go to a local centre, you know, they may have funding to transfer it into a digital copy that we can get it uploaded. All right? Because it's really interesting, you know, potentially people in America or Australia will want to see this, you know, and maybe they'll be doing this as well, so that we can actually see film footage from around the world of deaf clubs, okay? So I'm going to give you this, okay, and then I'm going to shut up, because I talk too much. Okay, so I know people will have some questions, so if people have got questions, can you show me? Who would like to start the ball rolling with a question? Do you want to come up here and sign, or do you want to sign? No, I'll sign to you, and then you can transfer it. Okay, relay. Okay, yeah, sorry, you're just asking about the scanning of these things and putting it onto the web. Yeah, it's onto this website here, so I'll give you the website address. So you can actually all do that from your own computers at home. Okay, it's actually called Share Deaf Archive, and you'll see it there. Okay, and you can see the footage that's already been uploaded and the photos that have been uploaded, and you'll have options then to upload your own. Okay, some of you might not be very confident with technology. That's fine. What I am actually planning to do is to come over, if people are interested, for example in Wales, you know, people from Cardiff, or people from the Valley, from Pontypridd, from Neath, from Barry, wherever. If they want training and how to do this, I can come and do it. I can give you the confidence to scan stuff and upload stuff on your own then, okay? So you can take that back and show other people then at your deaf clubs. Anybody else? Another question?
Hi Caroline, my name is Simon DC. I work with Sarah Lawrence. I just want to say how much I enjoyed the film, but it raises one real concern for me, and that's we've seen a fantastic sense of deaf culture from a long time ago, bringing it up to the present day. But I worry about what that's going to be like in the future, particularly with hearing aids and cochlear implants, the segregation, if you like, of deaf children, and this belief that parents will still have hearing children out of their deaf kids when they're wearing their hearing aids and cochlear implants. What's the BDA plan in relation to engaging with these youngsters and obviously making them, if you like, part of the future of the deaf community?
Thank you, Simon. Okay, somebody didn't get, oh, okay. There you go, Sarah's going to feed that. Okay. Okay, sorry, Simon. Okay, Sarah's just going to reply to somebody with visual impairment there. Okay. Okay. Okay, Simon, you're right. Yes, I mean this is a historical view of deaf community, you know, and a very strong community, you know, where deaf schools and deaf clubs at that time were incredibly important, and technology hadn't taken over at that time, you know. So, you know, as you can see, an absolute wealth of connections within that deaf community. The deaf community's changed. Okay, technology for a big part of it. I mean, cochlear implants, hearing aids, digital hearing aids, change in education, deaf schools. You know, I mean, we used to have deaf schools in Wales, but they've all closed down now. It's become a sort of subgroup, hasn't it? You know, there are lots of subgroups, and young people today are doing different things because of technology, computers, mobiles, texting, you know. So the importance of going to the deaf club, values have changed, you know, partly because of technology. There's more choice. There's more choice these days. And it's the same for hearing youngsters as well. In the old days, there wasn't any choice. If you wanted to meet up with your friends, you went to the deaf club. Simple as that. You know, it was the same, you know, when you went to school, you went to a deaf school, and you had those groups there, you know. And as they've closed down and become mainstream or PHUs, then you know, we have to accept that life has changed. And that has made it very difficult for the British Deaf Association to stay in touch with the deaf community. You know, in the past, we used to have a school leavers course, the British Deaf Association did. So, you know, everybody went to the deaf schools. As they were leaving, they would get involved with the youth branch of the BDA. They would go on courses. You know, everybody knew you went to the BDA. You know, missioners would direct you to the BDA. You know, now, of course, data protection. We're not allowed to know where people live. We're not allowed to know names and addresses. So everything's changed, and lots of things have influenced that. But the British Deaf Association is still here. You know, you have to remember, we're still here. And this is still important. You know, the history, the heritage, you know, collecting this evidence is still here. And it's very important for us to know, for you to know, that we're still here and we're still campaigning for sign language and better access. It's also important for us to remember that deaf children must know about their language. You know, and we can do that with the support of technology. Fine, of course, there are cochlear implants, there are hearing aids, you know. Parents have a right. Parents have a right to choose, you know. And, you know, what we are campaigning for is that parents are informed about all the options, including sign language, you know, and the BDA are getting very, very involved with families and youths to encourage more sign language. Because, you know, we're not going to say we want to go back to what we've just seen on that footage. Life changes. You know, I mean, I came from a deaf family, you know, 6 generations of deaf people in my family. So now they're all gone. I have 2 daughters. Both my daughters are hearing. You know, their partners come into the house and I have to adjust how I communicate. You know, that's life, you know, because their partners are hearing. But they're learning sign language, and we encourage them to learn sign language. You know, there's lots of hearing people out there with level 1, level 2, level 3, you know, because it's important that we fit in together and we work together. Everybody's so lazy here. Okay, okay. Okay, so you mentioned about schools and the youth with the BDA and why work with the BDA has stopped and things. Yeah, yeah. Partly because of data protection, yeah. And you're asking why the BDA aren't going into mainstream schools and things. Okay. Okay. Data protection is a big issue. Okay. The National Deaf Children's Society, the NDCS, you know, that's a big organization, and obviously they're working with parents, so that's a slightly different organization, but they are working with a lot of youngsters. Now, you asked me, you know, the BDA used to go into the deaf schools, why don't we now? Okay. Of our funding, 75% of it is public service, public money. Okay. And then 25% of it is from donations. So legacies, and some of that is ring-fenced for certain projects, etc. So if you remember the BSL Charter, okay, the local authorities, the councils signing a BSL Charter, that was about getting funding from public bodies. When that finished, what were we going to do? When the youth work was drying up, you know, the NDCS is there. The BDA knew we had a service, but the NDCS work was kind of overlapping our work. There was no point in repeating that work and reinventing the wheel. We have a sort of deaf youth group now, okay, so-called Grassroots, okay, and that's based in Belfast, in Ireland. And that's about encouraging families and young people, and they have funding, we give them funding, and it's starting now as well in Derby. Okay, so the BDA is encouraging that. Again, we're giving them some funding. They've got to follow certain criteria, but it's about developing that group. So you'll say, yeah, so where's the next generation? What's happening? Okay, so we've actually been contacted Gloucester, and we've contacted the NDCS there, and we're trying to say, look, okay, if you've got deaf children in mainstream, deaf children with cochlear implants, where are they going to go? They're all going to go sort of down to Bristol, okay? 90% of the parents are saying, no, my child's not deaf. They don't need to go to Bristol to go to, school down there. And the children are saying, no, I'm not deaf. I've got a cochlear implant. I've got a hearing impairment, whatever it is. It's a problem. It's a problem, and we need to change this. We need to change the identity crisis here. So you're saying if we see somebody deaf, you must get them involved and get them into the community. You're right, and there still are deaf schools around. There still are families that are strong deaf, genetically deaf. And there's still information that's getting passed through. And we need to link up with that. So for me, my work in Bristol. I work in a integrated school in Bristol, and a lot of children there don't want to sign, and they're saying to me, no, I'm not deaf. I say, well, I'm here. I want to teach you sign. No, I don't want to. I don't want to. We can't force them. Can't force them to sign. Okay. I've got a lot of going on down here. Have we got any more from up there? We got very quiet up in that corner there. Come on, somebody must be thinking about a question.
Hi, I was just wondering, I really enjoyed the film, by the way, but is it Simon? I'd like to, see more in depth on some of the subjects, because you covered a wide range, like employment, a little bit of education, the history of deaf clubs, politics, and things like that. So on the website you said there's extra footage and things like that. Are they separated into different categories, more in depth of each topic?
Okay, thanks for that question. Okay, in one part of the film, you see one part of the film where they were making parts for cars, remember? Yeah, okay, so that's obviously an employment section. On the website, what you'll see across the top, you'll see Deaf Club, you'll see youth, sport, education, schools. So what you can do is you click on each of those, and then it'll direct you to films particularly linked to that topic. But the BDA always feels really important that deaf people should share their experience, particularly employment, schooling, their work experiences. And it's really important to share those, because we need people to recognise this information, see this information. So there is film footage there on the website, so please do have a look. Also, there's photographs as well, a lot of photographs that people have uploaded. I know there's one from London. It was a printing firm. What was it called? Addit, I think it was called. And there were a lot of deaf people working there, particularly because their parents who owned the business had a deaf son, so they could sign there. So deaf people went and worked there. Okay, but also they had this thought that deaf people were very good at working with their hands. They believed that. So again, that's part of the deaf culture's history, deaf community's history. So unfortunately, that printing company's closed now, and nobody knows about that these days. So, okay. Other questions? Any other comments? Come on, what about this group over here? They're very, very quiet over here. Come on, come on. Nothing? Nothing? You're lost for words, lost for signs. Okay, oh, one. Here we go.
Hi, I'm just wondering, how do deaf children access sport clubs?
You mean mainstream sports clubs? Okay. In the past, deaf sports was incredibly important. It really was. Deaf schools always had a really strong sports department, football, a whole range of sports, cricket, etc. And that's why you saw quite a lot of the black and white footage here, a lot of the clips. You saw the football. Actually, the football was in Swansea. Okay, it was Wales against Sweden, I think it was. So there was clubs in Manchester. People would come on coaches from Manchester to see the game. It was incredibly strong, incredibly popular. Okay, so you'd have deaf teams who signed different, and they were classed as friendly, but you know what I mean. And deaf sport, unfortunately, has gone into decline, partly because of mainstream schools, partly because deaf kids are joining local sports clubs. In terms of local sports centres, to be honest with you, if you're deaf and you want to join, sometimes it can be a problem because of access, But does that mean that deaf people aren't fit? No, of course not. Even if access is a problem, they still join, get involved in sport. And again, sports centres want your custom. They want equality. They want to make sure that people have access. Unfortunately, of course, they don't have a budget for interpreters and things. So who sorts that out? As you saw here, you saw the march, you saw the militant deaf people here saying, look, this is our right. It's our right to have access. So things have started to change. I don't know if you know about the BSL Charter here. Do you know about the BSL Charter? Put your hand up if you know about the BSL Charter. Okay, four people here. Okay, at that time, you saw the march. Remember the march on the film? That was year 2000. Okay, at that time, what they were marching for was the recognition of BSL. And BSL was recognised in 2003. Okay. So that meant at that time, local authorities, I worked for Bristol at that time at the council, and BSL was recognised. It's great. So what happened then, my job, I came in and worked for Bristol City Council. I worked there for 9 years, and the BSL Charter sort of had 5 pledges about service and about access, about information, about interpreters, training of staff. So, so all staff will be trained in basic sign language, so they could say good morning, who do you want to see, things like that. So the local authorities, this started to spread throughout the local authorities where they would all sign the BSL Charter. You think that was enough? No, well, what happened was Bristol City Council, I worked there for 9 years. When I left, 3 days later, the BSL Charter disappeared. Because, it's fine. It was recognised, the language was recognised, it was accepted, but that's not enough. And what we're asking now is a BSL Act. Okay, so in 2015, anybody know what happened? Yeah, Scotland, of course, okay? The BSL Act was brought into force in Scotland. Okay, an incredibly important moment. So this means basically that BSL will be embedded. It will be involved from the grassroots up. Now, Wales needs to campaign for this too. Wales needs to campaign for a BSL Act. It's really, really important. Okay, because a BSL Act would mean that a sports centre, when a deaf person game, must provide access. They must provide some suitable interpreters. So sorry, your question there seemed a quite simple question, but I've I've gone into depth on it. Okay, hold that one a second. Okay. Okay, was there somebody up at the top there?
Hello. I enjoyed the film. Thank you very much. In Ireland, they've built a deaf village. Could you see that ever happening here in Wales?
I'm English, so I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer. You might have to ask some of the Welsh contingent here. What do you think? There we go. This gentleman, or somebody over there is going to organise it. Okay. It's interesting, isn't it? The idea of a deaf village. Because you're right. Yeah, it was a sort of. No, you've done your research, obviously. I remember. I mean, my grandmother, who was deaf herself, lived in London. Okay, and at that time there were a lot of deaf homes. I remember going to visit my grandmother, and she'd tell me stories, you know, and there'd be lots and lots of old people. You know, sorry, I keep forgetting I'm old myself now, but they would tell stories, and I was absolutely fascinated. I'd watch them for hours and hours and hours, and they'd share all these stories. Now in Scotland, I think there were 3 homes for deaf. Is that right? Yeah, three homes in Scotland. Okay, they've all gone now. They've all disappeared because, you know, deaf old people go into mainstream homes now, the same as happened with schools. So what happens is you get deaf people becoming isolated, and that is a problem. It's a real problem. Now, if there was a BSL Act, so it's up to you, Welsh people, okay, campaign, then things could improve. Okay, no, the one in Nottingham closed, unfortunately, no. Thank you. You brought up some interesting topics here. There's some people in the back here I haven't heard from. Have you got any questions? Yeah, do you want to ask? Yes, yes. Have we got a microphone?
Do we really want deaf people? Would deaf people?
The last comment about a deaf village is interesting. But would deaf people really want to be isolated from mainstream activity?
Interesting question. Do you want it? I mean, it's about choice, I suppose, isn't it? You know, now I'm going to answer this as far as visiting old people. Old deaf people are frightened. They don't want to be isolated. They want to be with other deaf people. So in those terms, yes, they want to be, they'd be happy to be together. Is there another question there? You've been waiting so long, you've forgotten what you're going to ask now.
Your comment about the Scottish bill and what we should do in Wales is interesting. We have a Welsh Language Act, which has been made available for people who have choices. Deaf people don't have the same choice as hearing people who can speak Welsh or English. And if there are people here this evening that feel strongly enough about a campaign, perhaps we should meet at the back of the hall later to see if in fact we could start something.
So, yeah, any local Welsh deaf people who feel you should be campaigning for a BSL Act in Wales, You know, I mean, hearing people have that choice, Welsh or English here, by law. What about deaf people's rights? Do you feel strongly about that? Yeah? Well, maybe you should get together, meet up with Edward afterwards. Yeah. Okay, we got one more question. Last question. Okay. I know somebody over here has had their hand up the whole time. Okay. Yay, first person to come up. Hello, hello, hello. Okay. Okay, some of you know who I am. Okay, I'm from Cardiff. Okay. You're talking about the film. It's fabulous. I think we all agree the film was absolutely fabulous. Okay. Now I'm going to ask you, is it possible in the future, you know, that you're going to make a DVD of this? Because I'm sure a lot of deaf people, a lot of families, you know, a lot of people who know BSL, it's their language, you know. I mean, I say this because it's my parents, you know, my parents were hearing, and, you know, I was brought up speaking my first language. They said, no, I'd say my first language is signing. I want to sign. I want to show people this, to say this is mine, this is my language. You know, and deaf people can have BSL as their first language. So, if you're making it a DVD, will you sell it? Is that going to happen in the future? Okay. Okay, I can see other people there saying, yeah, it might help a lot. Here we'll Okay, I was expecting this question. Okay, thankfully it came up. At the moment, the answer is no. What we're doing is we go around cinemas like Chapter. Again, thank you to Claire at Chapter here. Okay, it's been here this week. Okay, and we're going out to a few other cinemas. I think it carries on till the end of May. Okay, so there's 7 sort of regions in the project, and we will be going to them all. So Cardiff is easy. It's nice and central, really. But you know, some places have deaf clubs further afield, and what we'll do is we will then go out to those deaf clubs with the film footage. Okay, and my project, not the BSL project, my project finishes in October. Okay. My boss, the main project here, the 3-year project will finish in December. And then we will take that idea forward. And we'll go to the BDA after December and say, can we make a DVD of this? You know, parents, children, families. So the answer is no at the moment, but I can't really say no definitely. So you know, the Southwest, Wales, you know, you guys go out to parents and say to them, come see this show when it's on again. I hope some of you have got parents who with deaf children. Are any of you parents who've got deaf children here tonight? Yes, we've got one at least. Okay, that's nice. It's nice to see. Okay, I know we're having to finish now, but as a parent with a deaf child, I hope you found that useful, and maybe we can have a little chat afterwards. So okay, it's very important. It's very important to get everybody involved. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, I do have these that I want to give out with the websites on. Okay. Sorry, what's that? You've got a grandmother over there. Hey. Thank you for coming.
I just wanted to say to everybody, it's been such a wonderful... Sorry, stop. I just wanted to say it's been such a wonderful treat to have you all here. Thank you so much for coming here tonight. As terms of films, your community is really not served very well, and we're aware of that, and we are trying to make changes. We've been lobbying now for 2 years. Actually, Martin, I met a couple of years ago, and so we've been lobbying the government and with the BFI, British Film Institute, to improve things. We're trying to improve things all the time. And they announced a couple of months ago that no film that's made in Britain and gets released in Britain will be released without the captions. So High Rise, which is coming up with Tom Hiddleston, That's, yeah. And there's all kinds of films. So they are improving what they're doing. The big studios that have lots of money always put the captions. So in the big cinemas, you'll see lots of captions. But the smaller films, the ones we have, unfortunately, there isn't a lot of money. But at the same time, we say to them, you should be making the money. You should be making those changes because more people can come. So we are really, really happy you all came here tonight, because the more people that see this film and that come along to the cinema, it just shows them that they should be doing this, because you've all got money. You can all pay to come to the cinema. So, if show them what, how big a community this is and how many people really want this. Send us any information. Send us emails. Send us any information you have. It's really, really useful to use your thoughts on what we're doing going forward. So there's some forms at the back. If you just note down your email address, then we can get in contact with you with anything we're doing in the future. So yeah, thank you so much for coming here, and thank you to Carolyn. So thank you so much.
I've got one last question. I'd like everybody to get in for a last photo. Everybody waving. It's a lottery thing. We need a nice big photo of everybody who's come to see the film tonight. Fabulous.